but Ilotski Poldrum was closed.
The wine that we normally go to.
The one we normally go to was closed, like on a Saturday, nonetheless.
Well, you know, who wants to work on a Saturday? Much better than the day off.
Well, that's what Sundays are for. Hey everybody, welcome back to Chef Tyler's Croatian Kitchen. Today I got for you Vinski gulaš, which is Croatia's take on the French Bœf Bourgingnon, a dish that Julia Child called the greatest concoction known to man. So today we have some pretty simple ingredients. Of course we have our beef. I'm going with chuck roast cut into cubes of about ½ inch. We have 2 onions chopped, 4 cloves of garlic minced, 2 potatoes cubed. Alternatively, you could use flour. And then our spices, we have paprika, salt, pepper, bay leaf, tomato paste, beef stock. I also have pancetta, which is definitely not traditional, but I like to add it in because I think it adds a little extra flavor, and of course, a nice red wine. Going with a Pinot Crnji, which is a Croatian version of a Pinot Noir, which you can find very easily in America, and sub in for that. But if you can find a Plavac Mali, which is a traditional Croatian wine made from a grape found along the Dalmatian coast, I would totally recommend going for that as well. I believe Gudgic has one, and they're from California, and not sponsoring this video. Not much to do over here, so let's just go head on over to the stove where we'll start. We're over here at the stove. I have about a tablespoon of butter already melting in the pan. And first what we're going to do is we're going to take our pancetta and just add it in. You don't want the pan too hot when you put the pancetta in, so you can get the fat to render out. And we're just going to let this cook for maybe about 4 to 5 minutes until it gets nice and golden brown on the sides. Make sure you stir relatively frequently just to make sure all sides get evenly browned. So once you can see how the pancetta gets to be a little brown on all sides, we're going to remove it to a side plate. Just turn down the heat a little bit to avoid any burning of the fat. The use of a slotted spoon is good because you'll get most of the extra oil off and stayed in the pan for cooking later. Make sure you get all the pancetta out so it doesn't burn. And once the pancetta is out, we're going to go ahead and add in our beef. So we'll go maybe about a third or half of the meat all in at a time. You don't want to crowd the pan, so you get a nice sear on all sides. No one there. Then let the meat cook for just a few minutes, just so it browns on all sides. Once the meat has browned on all sides, we'll then move it again to the side plate and run through with the other side, the rest of the meat. Once you get all the sides browned, just take out the meat, let the juices drip out, and once again move to the same side plate as you did the pancetta to save for later. Once all the meat has come out, go ahead and brown the rest of the meat in the same fashion. There we go. And then we'll just... So once all the meat is done and put onto a side plate, just make sure that your fat hasn't burned. And if it hasn't burned, you're free to go ahead and add in our vegetables. In this case, all of our onions. Turn up the heat as well so we can saute the onions well. And let these cook until they get translucent, 4 to 5 minutes. Nice and dark color all from the browned juices from the meat. Of course you're free to add any extra vegetables you want, maybe carrots, celery, a typical mirepoix, but the traditional way is to just have onions. So once the onions have started to soften up, and you can tell if you just press in and there's very little resistance between the onion and your spoon, make a little hole, a little circle in the center, or in other words, push the onions out to the outside, and then we're going to add our garlic directly into that hole as best as you can. Try to get all the garlic out.
Your spoon's a little large for that.
My spoon is a bit too large, but we got everything out. And just let the let the garlic cook for about a minute. You'll know it's ready once you can start to smell the garlic. Then once you can smell the garlic, go ahead and stir everything together so the onions and garlic have mixed. And we're going to go ahead and make that little circle in the center once more. And this time we're going to take our tomato paste. You want to add about a tablespoon, but I never really measure this. I just let my heart tell me how much is enough. Put the tomato paste right into the center and let it sit for just a little bit, maybe about 20 to 30 seconds to let it caramelize. And then we'll stir everything in together. And once the tomato paste is incorporated with all your vegetables, we'll take our meat again with the pancetta and add that back into the pot, making sure to get all the juices off the plate that have come out of the meat while it was resting. And we'll stir everything together, let it cook for about a minute. It's at this point where if you don't want to use potatoes, you can add flour in, maybe about 2 to 3 teaspoons, and that'll help thicken it up. Some reason you might not want to use potatoes, or potatoes don't really store well, so if you know you're going to want to save this for 3-4 days, I would recommend against using potatoes. But if you are going to eat this immediately, or maybe save it for one day, potatoes are a great addition, and then the starch from the potatoes is what's going to thicken instead of the flour. Since I'm using potatoes, I will not be adding the flour in now. Just stir everything up together, and we'll add in our seasonings. So got all of our seasonings right here. We have, first we'll add some black pepper. Once again, seasonings, just let your heart take over, tell you what's going to be right. Twist it on instead of slamming it back in. We'll go with some salt as well. And of course, you can always add more seasoning later if you don't put too much in now. And lastly, the paprika. Paprika, of course, is to taste, but traditionally about 2 to 3 tablespoons. I think I'll do that. That seems enough. And we'll mix everything in together. And once all of our spices have been mixed up and all of our meat has been evenly coated, it's time to add in our wet ingredients. So about 2 cups or 500 milliliters of water, plus a bouillon cube. The amount of water per bouillon cube depends on the size of your cube, so just know how much you're supposed to use and use that much as well. If you have stock, that's probably even better than using the bouillon cubes. After you've added in the water and the stuff and the cube, we'll add in some wine. About 400 milliliters, about maybe that's 1 2/3 of a cup, but this is another thing that I just like to let my heart decide. As long as you can get all of the meat covered just a little bit, you should be fine. We'll stir everything together, bring up to a boil. And once everything is boiling, we're going to let it simmer for about an hour and a half. And of course, cover your beefs. If you want to use different meats, of course, you're more than welcome to. Veal you want to cook for closer to about an hour, pork maybe an hour and 15. But the end goal is always the same. Make sure that the meat is fork tender. Since we're going to be using potatoes, we're going to add the potatoes into the stew about 20 to 25 minutes before it is done cooking. That way the potatoes don't overcook and it doesn't change the texture of anything. So when 20 minutes before the end of cooking comes up, we'll be back to add in the potatoes, and I'll see you then. So it's about 20 minutes now before the goulash will be finished, so now it's going to be time to add in the potatoes. I had them sitting in water so they didn't dry out, and I dumped the water out. Now we're just going to add the potatoes into our goulash, and the starch from the potatoes will help to thicken up the goulash as well.
How do you know it's 20 minutes before they're done?
So if you go by the general 1.5 hours for beef, if you just do it after an hour and 10 minutes of it simmering, you have a rough idea. If you end up having to cook it a little bit longer, it's not that big of a deal. The potatoes aren't going to change much from, say, 20 to 25 minutes. But if you had the potatoes in there from the start and you were cooking them for a full hour and a half, they would not be very palatable. So we'll just stir everything together. I might add a little bit more water just so I can cover the potatoes and let them cook all the way through. But we'll just let it, of course, simmer for another 20 minutes and then everything will be done.
Tyler's taking a quick break, so we're gonna take a little taste. You said toothpick tender. Wait,
I said
fork
fork
tender
tender,
or
but I'm
toothpick tender?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
Are you recording it?
I am now, yeah.
So just to check if everything is done, I'm gonna grab one of my potatoes. I'll just take a toothpick, and if it goes through that resistance, you know you're done. I know I said fork tender before, but using a fork or a toothpick, it doesn't make much of a difference. So after you've tested everything is fork tender, we'll just do a quick taste for seasoning. We didn't put too much salt and pepper in at the beginning. It's always easy to add some later. And plus the addition of the pancetta adds some seasoning as well. So we'll just take a quick taste. Honestly, I think that's fine as it is. If it needs some more salt and pepper, of course, feel free to add some, but this right here has been perfectly seasoned. So we'll just put these off to the side and serve in our bowl. So a nice deep soup dish is the perfect bowl for this. We'll just take our ladle, get a good amount of beef and potatoes in, and some more as well. There, and some sauce too. Like with the punina paprika, I was saying the Croatian way is to generally have things a little more soupier, but if you like it a little thicker, you can either mash up the potatoes in your bowl or just leave it on the stove for a little bit longer. I would say strain everything out so you're not continuing the cooking process, and then you just have the liquid and you can cook that down to your desired consistency. Well, now we have everything here. Let's take our taste for Greg. Let's get all the meat and potatoes to try to get all up in one. Oh, I'm burning the roof of my mouth. So maybe wait for it to cool down a little bit before you take a taste so you can avoid more burning your mouth like I did. But the taste is amazing. You get the pungent from the paprika meshes well with the spices coming from the pancetta. The beef is perfectly cooked, as are the potatoes. And always, of course, you can serve with some bread on the side and just take a piece off, and you can really sop up all of the soup there. You really get more of the paprika there with the sauce on the bread. But there we have it, Vinski Gulas. Dobar tek. It's good, but God, I burned the roof of my mouth on that one. It does taste amazing though. You got all the... I can't get over the burn. You get all the... you get the spice from the paprika, which as well with the pepper.
You want to take another take? You're gonna use it.
I think I'll just cut something. Ow.